fact of the matter is, what the American people are frustrated about is the Uniparty in this town. The fact that this entire Congress, the previous Congress, the previous 217 Congresses, have done nothing but make this country weaker, with more debt, with less ability to have freedom as we pile up laws and regulations around the heads of the American people and constrain them. Yet, ignore our fundamental duty to actually defend a sovereign nation. That's the actual truth. The gentleman from Arizona referred to crocodile tears. Well, I'm sorry, but I do shed some tears for the people that I represent that are being absolutely decimated by open borders. The young man yesterday morning in a coffee shop in Austin, Texas, who grew up in Laredo and lives in San Antonio, is a constituent of mine who lives near the airport in San Antonio, who came up talking about family members of his who have died, who have been had their lives upended, had their ranches upended, talking about single adult males coming into this country. The videos that I was shown by members of the Texas State Legislature just this last Friday at a football game, pulling me aside and saying, what can you do to stop this? We are begging for help. We are desperate for help, showing me videos of people running away from Border Patrol, single adult males. And if 2023, if you are running away from Border Patrol, you are up to no good. I assure you, you are up to no good. And that's the actual reality of what we're dealing with on the ground. Speaker of the House in Texas came up to me and said, "Man, we got $13 billion. We're in on this. $13 billion the state of Texas is in on and having to deal with the border crisis." Now, Texas, thankfully, has a fraction of our state devoted to federal land, something like 1.x%. You know, basically, we got Big Bend and nothing else. And the fact is, though, Texas is under siege. Under Operation Lone Star in the state of Texas, we've had 435,700 illegal immigrant apprehensions by our own Texas authorities, 34,000 criminal arrests, 30,900 felony charges. We've seized over 428 million lethal doses of fentanyl. We have, yes, bused 11,300 migrants to Washington, 13,500 migrants to New York City, 7,000 to Chicago, 2,600 to Philadelphia, 1,100 to Denver, 480 to LA. Yes, we have done that. That is a fraction of the 435,000 apprehensions we have had, or the $13 billion that we've had to spend in Texas in order to do the job of the federal government. It is the state of Texas, and I would add the state of Arizona, New Mexico, California, but particularly the state of Texas and Arizona, Tucson in particular, left holding the bag. That's the truth. And I would ask the gentleman from Arkansas if he agrees that the purpose of this legislation is to deal with the fact that we've got one of our colleagues from New York, and we obviously have a colleague from New York here, but unfortunately he's not at the dais at the moment, that is dealing with the repercussions of what they're dealing with in New York. And they're trying to figure out what they're doing with individuals. And now this agreement is struck. And that raises questions from a federal standpoint. And I wonder if the gentleman can expand on that and why it's so critically important to our friends from New York that we deal with this.
Yeah, as I said in my testimony, this was brought to my attention by Representative Malliotakis, who, when she told me what was happening, I thought there must be some mistake. They're not going to build migrant shelters on federal land. Surely there's other land somewhere in the state of New York, because it was the governor of New York that came to the Biden administration asking for help in taking care of all these illegal migrants that were coming into the state because of their sanctuary city laws. So, as you said, it's a fraction of the number of migrants that you're dealing with in Texas, but the local representation at the city, the state, and in Congress are all feeling the repercussions of the actions of the mayor, the governor, and the president of the United States in their local area.
One quick question. If I'm correct, in March of 2021, early in the administration of the current president, you and a colleague of yours of ours from Arizona, Representative Gosar, sent a letter to Secretary Mayorkas about the environmental related concerns about the border crisis. One of the points raised in the letter was deserts along the southern border being used as dumping grounds and vegetation in the area being destroyed by migrants. First of all, did you ever get a response from the administration on that letter?
No, they seem to want to ignore that. And I think the statistic I've heard is 8 or 9 pounds of trash per migrant. So multiply that times 8 million, and that tells you how much trash has been dumped along the border. I know you've seen it in your area. It's amazing the heaps and piles of trash that gets discarded when they come across the border. And some of this is on federal land. And then you have the devastation that's happening further across the border. We have cartels that are growing marijuana on Forest Service land in California and other places. And there's a lot of devastation that's happening to our federal lands directly related to the failure to secure the southern border.
Right. I've got a stat here that I was just looking up about an estimate, conservative estimate showing more than 500 tons of trash being left behind by illegal border crossers each year in the Buenos Aires sector out in Arizona. And frankly, that's an old data point. It's not even updated. I could go find a more updated data point, but we frankly never get really good responses out of the administration when we ask the questions, because frankly, the administration has no interest in providing that information because it would be devastating. And the gentleman, he can respond if he wants, from Arizona, talks about this being a political point, that the only reason that we're raising this issue is for a political gain in an election year. Well, I've been in Congress for 5 years and have been talking about this under both administrations about the need to do what we need necessary to secure the border. And I can assure you that there are no crocodile tears here that are not being directed towards the people that are having their lives devastated and turned upside down by wide open borders. And I can assure you that it is not a political reality. And I wonder if the gentleman from Arkansas thinks, your constituents or constituents and people across the country, do you view this as something that is critical from a election year messaging perspective, or a perspective of making sure that our people are actually secure and safe from dangerous cartels, from dangerous criminals, from people that can come in here with wide open borders, from fentanyl pouring in, but also just the absolute devastation of the volume, just the simple volume? If the gentleman wants to respond.
And the bill is about protecting our federal lands. The immigration crisis is mingled in with that. And I was talking about the cartels growing dope on federal lands. They also use pesticides and herbicides that you would get thrown under the jail if you were using those for agriculture production here in the U.S. I think about the federal land in my state. If I were to go out and throw 8 or 9 pounds of trash on the ground,
Right.
I don't think I would get off scot-free from that. I don't think any American citizen would, nor should they. But we seem to turn a blind eye because this is happening with illegal immigrants. And another stat that a lot of people don't realize is that about 40% of the southern border is federal land.
And that is true. And again, we have Big Bend, but the vast majority of the Texas border is not federal land. But it's a significant problem. Another question about the federal lands. If federal lands are now going to be used by the administration as effectively a bailout in order to place migrants from cities that are overwhelmed, then is that not a greater pull factor then for more migrants to come, particularly when the laws involving asylum, parole are being stretched well beyond their legal intent, in fact, in violation of the law, to attract millions of people to rush the southern border? Will not the placement of migrants who have come here and are being released into the United States, an automatic entry program, that's what the Biden administration has in place, is an automatic entry program, that they will be placed onto federal lands, will that not increase the pull factor of the people coming to the southern border claiming asylum and seeking parole?
And it seems like everything this administration does is to increase that pull factor. And you think about this migrant shelter, it has food, housing, and they do your laundry for you. If that's not a pull factor for people to come here, along with all the other pull factors for people to come here, I don't know what would be. And the ranking member talked about, and this is something we heard on our visit to Floyd Bennett, how the city of New York was going to pay the Park Service a lot of money for this lease, and they will be able to reinvest it into the Park Service unit to make the facility better in the future. And I thought, what if a Republican president wanted to lease out some of Yellowstone to some corporation that would pay Yellowstone some money so they could go in and make the experience better for the future? Would our friends across the aisle have a problem with that? But the precedent's been set here now in New York that this can actually be a fundraising exercise for the Park Service to get more funding to make the experience better in the future.
I think, but gentlemen, I yield back.